Hi and welcome to the Reykjavík Drop-In, where we here at the Reykjavík Grapevine offices in Reykjavík interview people who drop by the office, either some of our feature writers, right, like today, or in other cases, people who just happen to come by and have something interesting to say. With us today is Elías, who not just, but 3 weeks ago interviewed the Prime Minister on our behalf and has turned in a lengthy, enlightening interview, giving a lot of context for the coming winter in our Prime Minister's political, agenda, I guess. And it's timely that we speak of this now. The issue will be out on Friday. Today, the new parliament is actually beginning. They have processions right now, or like a ceremonial things going on at the is it the cathedral?
Yeah, the National Cathedral.
Yeah, it doesn't really look like a cathedral, does it? And so Parliament is restarting. A lot of stuff has been left undone since the last Parliament, thanks to a filibuster that took most of the time this spring. And this new coalition has a lot of things they want to get done, and precious little time perhaps to get it done in.
Yeah, and we're really proud of the feature you wrote, and really happy we were able to take the time to edit it up, allow you to give more context. One of the terms used frequently in the feature that maybe might take difficulty for a non-Icelander or somebody who hasn't been here long is your discussion of the nuclear option in Parliament. And what was the nuclear option that Kristrún Frostadóttir enacted in last Parliament?
Well, to give you the context of that, so one of the key policies that the new government that took power following the elections last November was effectively increasing the rent or the tax on the fisheries companies and the quota owners, so to speak. And for one reason or another, the opposition fought very fiercely against that, to the point of what critics would say was breaching parliamentary norms through their filibuster, which kept on going. I don't remember exactly the number of hours. It's in the article. It was what was it?
It was a long time.
Yeah, it was. We have standing filibusters here where you're required to be speaking to maintain your filibuster.
No.
Okay.
No,
that's
so how it works here is that you can have effectively an infinite number of speeches, but they can only be 5 minutes long. So you had an increasing amount of increasingly absurd speeches about nothing, including one parliamentarian who seemed to be a bit tipsy, giving a 5-minute speech about effectively nothing. And so the nuclear option, which has very rarely been used, allows the government to force a vote on an issue and to therefore break the deadlock, to break the filibuster. And that came after, the Prime Minister she gave a very rousing speech in Parliament talking about how what the opposition was doing was effectively holding the process hostage and was a direct threat to Icelandic democracy because it was hindering the government from functioning. The way elections work is that a majority is created, a government that's supposed to have a mandate to be able to do stuff, and what this meant was everything was stopped. It was not just this legislation; it was everything. Nothing could get through, and they were going far into the traditional summer vacation of Parliament.
And she didn't push it through, and now we have.
Well, you should cut the increased rent on the fisheries through by using that so-called nuclear option. And I think maybe for context on filibusters and the Icelandic law regarding them, if anybody wants to hear that, the current law was last changed in 2007, I think. And so prior to 2007, you had what you would call, I think, a standing filibuster. There was no cap on the length of the speeches. there was a cap on the number of speeches.
Mm.
So there was like a physical barrier in how long you could have a filibuster going on, right? Just the speakers can stand and speak for so and so long before they have to just collapse.
Mm.
And there we've had some filibusters historically, which have tended to be sort of almost like a ceremonial thing. It's almost like a way of materializing sort of the opposition's opposition to the said law that is being debated. So they changed that in 2007. So now we have no limitations on the speeches, just limitations or a cap on the length of them, which kind of changes the whole game and makes like an endless filibuster physically possible, which it wasn't before. The so-called nuclear option is the 71st article of the Parliament law, and it has been used before. So in that sense, it's been used twice, and it's more than half a century ago. But in that sense, it's like a law on the books. It's there for a purpose. So we can also debate whether or not like calling it the nuclear option is fair. It's kind of like actually a failsafe there to battle like a needlessly long filibuster.
Yeah, so I mean, I guess the reason why people might refer to it as the nuclear option is that effectively what the opposition was doing was breaking the quorum. I think it's very fair to say.
Mm-hmm.
This is not something that traditionally is done. This kind of filibuster, we have never seen it before.
Okay.
Not since the laws were changed. I don't even think since.
No, I mean
to Parliament in '91.
The filibusters we had before were nothing like an American filibuster.
No,
like they would be just for show, just to show sort of discontent with the law, but not like as an attempt to disrupt and derail completely. And I've also been told that filibustering is not a tradition in our neighboring countries, Scandinavian countries. It's just not a thing. So it's highly unusual for the norms here. Mm-hmm. And we talked about this this summer, you and me, and prior to the interview you did, that it would be there was a fear that the filibuster might continue, and that would definitely completely change the norms of how Alþingi works.
That's right. We were talking about this when we were prepping for the interview.
Yeah.
Before a change in the opposition. Because we thought that the filibuster would be the strategy for this session.
But it seems, at least in name, that won't be the case. They changed the person who's kind of in charge of such things for the Independence Party, the opposition party. They changed the chairman of the parliamentary party, and that chairman has come on the record saying that filibusters are unpopular and we're not doing them. So we'll see about that. But that's at least what they say right now.
Yeah, because I think it was very clear. It's been very clear from the polling that the public did not support this. The people want to see government function. They want to see Parliament be able to pass laws, and this is also it's a highly popular legislation. People support higher taxes on the fisheries industry by and large. So, and I think many people saw what the opposition was doing as you're not serving the people, you're serving special interest at the moment.
And you could see that sentiment in the polling numbers for these parties as the filibuster went on and into the summer, where you saw the opposition losing in the polls and the coalition gaining, not all of the parties, but two of them. And that is also in itself, in a Scandinavian or an Icelandic context for just politics in this century, highly unusual. Usually the parties in power, their polling numbers decline as their tenure proceeds. And that's highly unusual. We've been seeing that like ever since the early 2000s, that any government in power in any Western European country tends to lose votes.
Yeah, especially since the financial crash.
Yeah. So that's also unusual and speaks to the sheer unpopularity of those actions, I think.
One thing that I especially appreciated in the feature is Elias put into context previous prime ministers, and I believe it's Johanna the
Sigurðarson.
Yeah. the contrast in styles, demeanor, and situation of these two prime ministers. Could you kind of restate that? I mean, I like the language you used in the feature, but if people don't know who Kristrún's not analog but predecessor is, and how strongly the difference is just in appearance and demeanor and kind of mandate at this point, because as you noted, Kristrún, since she's been in, has, as we said, unusually popularity has boomed. That wasn't the case for her
predecessor.
I want to say almost mentor, but it feels like not a mentor, but it feels like she's standing a little bit on the shoulders, but in a different way.
I don't think I would call Jóhanna Sigurðardóttir Kristrún's mentor. I don't even know if they know each other that well.
Okay,
but the reason why I mention her is that, you know, obviously she is the last social democrat, last prime minister from Samfylkingin.
Yeah.
I mean, she is also the first female prime minister, and she began, like, she was immensely popular. You know, she comes in after the financial crash in the elections of 2009 and has a very big mandate, you know, and it quickly goes badly for her.
Yeah.
You know, there was the most boring, I think, geopolitical issue ever, which was IceSafe, that kind of tanked the government. Which, I mean, I don't know if people are interested in that, but it was
Well, IceSafe is, for English-speaking readers, especially those from England, it's kind of important.
Yeah, and the Netherlands, apparently.
Yeah.
Germany.
So that I guess that's what landed us on the terrorist list.
Oh, Iceland got on the UK whatever list. They used like a terrorist legislation to deal with us.
Right. It seemed like a colonialist application of the law, in that Iceland had for some reason promised very high returns for pensioners.
Well, I mean, the thing is, though, first of all, it is complicated in the sense that when you say Iceland had promised, I don't think that's quite fair.
Yeah, right.
It was a private bank.
Right,
However, where that actually makes sense is in, I think people kind of forget how insanely incestuous the relationship was between the financial industry and the banks in particular and Icelandic government. You know, when you have the president effectively coming out and, you know, publicly endorsing Icelandic banks. You know, the Icelandic government was, I mean, not just the government, like the public was kind of mad for how great we were at banking. And that was the vibe before. So
we were the new Celtic tiger, right? And we were.
Well, I mean, it was. I mean,
Vikings of banking. I remember they had different terms for how great they were at banking.
Yeah, I mean, I think the term most hilariously used was probably the Icelandic economic miracle.
Yeah.
But anyways, well, I mean, it's if people are interested in this, I guess they can read the Wikipedia page or something. But it was
our back issues.
Yeah.
We were terrified because we saw the emperor had no clothes, and as we screamed and pointing out, obviously,
sure,
it was not a very popular opinion in the mid 2000s.
No. You could not. I mean, I was very young at the time before the crash, so. Sadly, I kind of missed out on the party. You know, I know you got a bit of taste of the high life.
Yeah, a bit, but not through this magazine.
No. I mean, I guess it was easier finding advertisers.
No.
No?
Like we weren't in the choir of of the applause. So we weren't really banking in on the vibe either, so it didn't really help.
I mean, the only thing I can remember.
But I saw some nice things like in my like side gigs.
Yeah. I mean, I remember I was you know, when I was in high school, I had this gig, getting like advertisement deals with companies because that's what's happening here. And I remember just the banks like throwing money at us.
Mm-hmm.
It was insane. Like we were getting internationally renowned musicians to come play at our school dances because we were that flush with cash. You know, that was the only kind of experience I had. But anyway, if we circle back to why I'm mentioning this,
and Johanna
is that so Johanna started out really strong, it quickly went really, really bad. And what happened was you got a decade, effectively, more than a decade, of just complete irrelevance for the Social Democrats in Iceland.
As she was swept out of, as she eventually lost power. And
so in 2013, they lost, like, what was it?
They came in with 3 MPs.
Yes.
Yeah, well, no, that was the election after. I think it was in 2013 they lost a lot, and then
it was the following one.
Yeah. And then the following one they were down to 3 MPs, and almost dropped out of parliament. And I think people might be interested, at least people that kind of know the history of politics in Scandinavia, is that there, for the majority of the 20th century and into the 21st century, politics has been dominated by the Social Democrats. But we have never had that kind of center-left dominant force in Icelandic politics. Iceland is kind of different in that way because we've always had the Independence Party has always been the dominant force. They used to be pulling in the 90s like 30-something percent, before that like 40. But we've never had a Social Democratic Party like arguably we have today.
Mm-hmm.
So what Kristrún has managed to achieve, well, this is arguable. Because my grandmother, she argues that this is not Kristrún that has achieved this, but Katrín Jakobsdóttir, the previous prime minister. Because what Katrín Jakobsdóttir managed to achieve was to effectively destroy the left. Like, there are no left-wing parties left in parliament.
Well,
the Pirate Party's out, the left wing's out, the Social Party didn't get in. And the left-wing party managed to, which was part of the coalition government of Jóhanna Sigurðardóttir, they managed to survive. And they were a bigger party than the Social Democrats for the, throughout the 2010s. And obviously they got into government, had a prime minister. And because the left is kind of crumbled, if you are left of center, where do you go? Who do you vote for? Well, the Social Democrats are basically your only option.
Okay.
So, but what is interesting about Jóhanna and Kristrún, I think especially, is that they are on paper polar opposites of each other. Jóhanna Sigurðardóttir is very old school left. She was kind of women's rights activist. She worked with the unions, was a union representative, was a secretary before entering politics at the cardboard factory.
Kassagerðin.
The crate factory.
That's where Pippi used to
work. Yeah, the crate factory. Yeah, which was a historic place in Iceland. Anyway, and she entered politics and spent. She ended up being in parliament for 35 years, and was a veteran of Icelandic politics. But when she becomes prime minister finally in 2009, famously 15 years earlier, she said, "Min tími mun koma."
Yeah,
my time will come, and it did for a brief while.
Yeah.
Well, but Kristrún is a highly educated, this is a person that studied in Ivy League universities, worked for Morgan Stanley, worked for the business lobby as chief economist, and has only been in politics for a very short while. Like, this is her second election.
Yeah, she studied, I guess we note that she studied at the Clintons' alma mater, right? She studied at Yale.
Yeah.
And Boston University.
Yeah. Yeah. And before entering politics, she worked for an investment bank, Kvika. And this was a very typical, predictable criticism that she got from the business paper here was, while you're so wealthy, how can you be a social democrat? You're a hypocrite, blah, blah, blah. Which I think is always very unfair and a weird criticism, because you can have opinions about the system, still benefit from the system.
Right. It's possible you could be wealthy and want the people around you not to
be
suffer.
poor, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
It may sound novel, but it's not that insane, is it?
No. And I don't even think, but this is another point that I touched upon in my piece that I think is to her benefit at the moment, is that because he's such a novice when it comes to politics, we don't really know, to be honest, that much about her. You know, where she stands on things. And I felt it was when I was speaking to her, especially apparent when it came to discussion about the European Union.
Great. Yeah, because that's what everybody asks about this piece. What did she say about the European Union? And I have my take on reading the quotes, but I'd like to hear your... I strongly feel that she might act a certain way, and I'd love to hear what you...
I mean, my sense was just like, she was kind of nonchalant about it, I guess, would be my take. I mean, obviously, you know, her predecessor, Jóhanna Sigurðardóttir, led the government that started negotiations with the EU about Iceland becoming a member. So it is still on the platform of the party.
Yeah, the party seems to be strongly identified with the EU movement.
Yeah, and the coalition party, Viðreisn, the Reform Party, they're also the other EU party in Parliament. But I kind of got a sense asking her, well, you know, obviously we're going to have this referendum about it in 2017. And she...
2027?
Yeah, 2017, 2027, sorry. But her focus was just like, oh, you know, democracy will take care of this. You know, the people will speak. It's a complicated issue. Like, it wasn't the kind of typical spiel you would get from a pro-EU politician. You know,
that was my thought reading it too.
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, she didn't talk about European...
Fascinating politician.
Yeah, she didn't talk about European values or stronger together or whatever, you know, people talk about. And I think, I mean, it could be just very smart politically because it is it's a conscientious issue in Iceland. People are very, you know, have strong opinions about this. Certain, you know, industry lobbies are vehemently against this. Many people don't like it, you know, Brussels bureaucrats, the kind of typical thing you would see in maybe more populous circles around Europe. And some people feel very strongly about it. You know,
Iceland's neighbors, I know they're Scandinavian in origin, but the neighbors are the UK and the United States. I don't know. I feel like strongly the anti-European Union discussion has gone, like you said, among populist movements, makes it scary to engage.
It's something you have to navigate very carefully, I think, and was kind of my sense of what she was doing. I think her answers were very apt. They were clever. They were, you know, agile, but I didn't get a sense that she felt very strongly about it or viewed it as something that had to be high on her agenda for being a successful prime minister. So what I think will be interesting to see is, you know, leading up to the referendum, what will be her take? Will she be campaigning for this heavily? Will she try to step aside and just let the debate kind of unfold? I think it will be very interesting to look at.
There was a quote that was repeated in an earlier draft, because she obviously repeated it, and it was so shocking to me to read. And that seemed to me to be that she sees something on the horizon. I guess we were talking about Macbeth before we came in. I mean, something wicked this way comes. I said with an American accent, I'm sorry, but that...
Your 16th century English accent?
that maybe, as you said, when you look towards Europe, when you look towards Poland and Hungary, she seemed to be having that in mind in the way she was talking about what might happen. And she said this repeatedly, if she can't get things in line with her party, if she can't get the government to function. Do you remember these quotes I'm referring to?
Yeah. Well, you know, let's just start by saying that I think Kristrún Frostadóttir is a very intelligent person that knows her stuff. And, you know, she can see what is happening politically in Europe and especially the United States, I guess, which is...
Obviously, elephant in the room. I'm sorry, I should have started with that. I forgot about it.
Yeah, but the political wind, so to speak, are blowing a certain direction, it seems.
Yeah.
You know, you have this kind of backlash towards woke, as people like to call it.
Mm-hmm.
You got this anti-immigrant sentiment blowing up all over Europe and the US. You get this debate about LGBTQ, issues, minorities. And Iceland, even though we're an island, we're not isolated from, the discourse that happens across the world. And I think what he means is that, because he speaks about this, that she blames this on people losing trust in institutions, in politicians. The system has failed so many people, we can't trust it anymore. And we also noticed that there's a lot of, like, I guess, anti-intellectualism going on. People mistrust experts. I think that kind of went into hyperdrive with COVID. And she knows that if people lose faith in government here in Iceland, if it can't function, then they will turn to what she calls people with easy answers to complicated questions, And I think she's right in that. But what is interesting about that is, so I remember watching her New Year's speech this year, her first one, and it was insanely boring. It was so boring. It was hard to watch. It was so boring, but I loved it. I thought it was great because it just reeked of competence. You know what I mean? It felt adult. It felt like, she's an administrator, I think, would be fair to say. She's not a populist. And she had amazing election results for whatever reason, in a time where populism is on the rise everywhere, despite not being a populist. Which kind of reminded me, and I mentioned this in the article, of Mark Carney in Canada.
Right.
And there are some similarities there. They're both bankers, highly educated bankers.
Yeah.
And they're kind of, they're campaigning on competence rather than emotions, or I'm going to solve everything. But the question is, like, and I'm not sure about this, can a government in today's environment ever be competent enough to survive? I'm not sure. And I think we are witnessing something happening with neoliberalism, and we're at a certain crossroads with that. And just institutionalism in general. And I mean, I think Kristrún is a prime example of a neoliberal politician. She's from a center-left party, but she very much believes in, market capitalism.
Yeah. From the same institution that brought us the Clintons, but I still think she's.
Let's not compare to them.
I'm sorry. I think that's very unfair. Sorry. Yeah.
No, I mean, all this kind of makes me ponder whether or not, she's perhaps prioritizing that objective in running a competent, trustworthy government over sort of a one fixed solution approach to the EU or something. So she would rather run a competent government than wage all on joining the EU, right?
Yeah, I think
so.
I think that's correct.
Which would sort of indicate that she's gonna do, as I think you put it, play referee rather than anything else.
That was your line.
Oh, is it his line? Sorry.
Okay,
sorry.
Very much.
It's a good line. I'm sorry I misquoted.
No.
Whose brilliant line that is.
I'm stealing all of Elias's lines from this piece. I think it's a fascinating piece. I think that a prime minister would spend so much time with an English language newspaper indicates that maybe competence and transparency could be the cure to what has ailed other governments.
Yeah, and I think, because people didn't really know who she was when she first entered politics. Like I said, she's from the business community. But people would watch her in debates, especially against Bjarni Benediktsson, the former finance minister, former
Prime
Prime
Minister,
Minister, was the leader of the Independence Party until the election. And because she is a highly educated person that knows, the economy, how it functions, she's an economist, she can tussle with the best of them when it comes to discussing, economic policy. And people quickly saw that she is very intelligent and she is competent. But I wonder, especially, I think maybe you would be interested in talking about this, but what kind of has been happening, especially over the summer here in Iceland and very recently. I wonder if she is going to get blindsided by the kind of populist elements that are kind of on the rise at the moment in Iceland. And I'm, because we've seen that with governments across Europe and in the US. They kind of dismiss it, they don't engage with it, and all of a sudden it's everywhere.
And then at the same time, it's hard to engage with.
Yeah.
Because it's so incredibly dumb or disproportionate that even addressing it is kind of problematic. So you end up with like this damned if you do, damned if you don't kind of a situation.
Definitely, but I think it's a mistake to ignore it.
Yeah, but it comes to a topic on like how do you address it, right?
Yeah.
How do you deal with, say, a recent example, centrist party, the right-wing centrist party MP Snorri Másson talking about trans issues on national television.
I think somebody needs to ask him, why do you care? Like, why is this an issue? And I wonder, because I think the opposition has been very lame. Since the election. I think they don't really have much to offer.
What strikes one when you see it is, first of all, like, it's almost the beginning of Parliament, and you have like an MP from the opposition on television, and you're not asking them questions about or having them discuss like their policy ideas, probably because they don't have any, and yet you allow them to be platformed discussing something that is just an imported culture war that doesn't really make any sense here.
Yeah.
In the same way the filibuster was imported.
In the same way the filibuster was. And then you set up a thing where he's talking nonsense, and then you have like a competent, educated person trying to like debate him, but there's no debate going on really. So you kind of looking at this clash of ways of tackling debate. Like,
what kind of bothers me about this is that so much time is being spent on this at the moment, and energy.
Yeah.
And trans people, they're I guess 0.5% of the global population, and I think people should be allowed to live how they want. But we as a society, why is this the big issue we need to be focused on? We have so many problems. The housing market is a massive problem. Young people can't afford to buy apartments. AI is going to be taking all our jobs, especially as journalists, I guess. Climate change is happening and it's real. During my day job as a journalist that covers the Arctic, that's so much spent on just reading terrifying reports about,
the
warming Arctic. We got populism on the rise. We got, immigration is a massive issue, a policy issue we need to talk about. Why are people spending all this time talking about trans issues? It confuses me to no end. And all I can think is with certain politicians making such a big deal about this is they have very little else to offer. And they see this as a very low-hanging fruit that you could grab, you could get headlines, and then when you get criticized, you can paint yourself up as some kind of a free speech warrior that's being oppressed. Because all this kind of populism, it needs this kind of weird duality, schism, where they are both brave warriors, but also oppressed people that don't get any platforms everywhere.
Right. Yeah, they're also victims.
Yeah, and they're being silenced. Yet that's all you can hear is them babbling about nonsense constantly everywhere. And it is And I think that should be what we should be talking about. It's like, why is this being discussed?
You make a great point, and this has been part of a lot of our behind-the-scenes discussion at the Grapevine, and among other media members.
Yeah. I just had Elías Þórsson from Heimildin on yesterday, and we were discussing why we didn't really cover this. And they did their reporting on it was like, well, as they pointed out, like, if you have nothing to add to this, why would you kind of, quotation marks, retweet it? Why would you give it more airtime? What they did was that they basically, looked at, how much of the time of the debate each person had gotten. That was their take. We didn't go there, and we went nowhere with it because we didn't feel like it was an issue we could add anything to. So why spread it more?
It's difficult with a cultural paper in English. We engage it on an intellectual level that is maybe higher than we've been judged before if we're trying to go too high. There's no room editorially for. Traditionally, we have not had room for simply degrading people's basic dignities. So we always thought there was a certain level of conversation that was meant for the bathroom wall and nowhere else. But I am left thinking about, of all people, the popular writer Chuck Klosterman, who, when confounded with the results of the U.S. elections, said it's clear that you can be in a camp that learns more and more conventionally. And the more you learn in conventional manners, the less you know about actual living culture in a place and I think that's especially true in places that have crested and regressed. My hope is that Iceland has not crested and regressed. My hope is that this was a blind, like a blind punch thrown, attempted to be a sucker punch at a government that is clearly dominating.
I think this was, throwing shit at the wall and seeing what sticks, and I think it stuck. I think that's the issue.
It did stuck is the problem.
And that's what I'm saying is that I don't understand why we're having this debate. This is not one of the big issues, and I think most people can agree with it.
Yeah.
When they start thinking about it in that way, the amount of attention this has been getting and the amount of time that has been spent on debating this, we need to understand, like, this is a private issue for people.
Yeah.
There's a healthcare element to this. Is this one of the great societal ills of the 21st century? No. I mean, I think objectively you can say that. It's not. There are so many issues we should be focusing on, and this is not one of them. But it's easy, it's very easy. And I think for some people, this isn't about trans people. I think this is about attacking all LGBTQ people.
Fairly obvious.
I think what happens, you're moving the Overton window a bit. You're pushing it until and you don't dare to say, well, I hate gay people, because that's a very unpopular stance still. But trans people are a more fair game in some sense. And then you get into this claptrap about, this is about protecting children or whatever. If you really care about children, like, think about fight for a better housing market, more equitable housing market.
Yeah.
Better school system.
Better schools, Think about, are my kids going to have jobs in the future, or is AI going to take it all? We already see that, like, entry-level gigs for, like, even programmers in the U.S. are disappearing.
Right.
Is the tax system going to be fair for my kids? It's a,
Yeah.
It's a whole...
There are so many things. If you really care about children, like, these are things you could be spending your time on. Not this. This touches on so few people, but it's easy. It's headline grabbing. It's easy to sensationalize, and then I think you have this kind of ecosystem of podcasters where you tap into the zeitgeist. People are riled up about something, and then you talk about it because it's easy clips to throw out.
Right.
And then people respond to them, and you get, interaction with engagement, which gives you money. Like, I think this has been driven not by there's no sincerity here for there's no care for society and about making it better. I think there's a lot of grift, and there's a lot of low-hanging political fruits that people are trying to take advantage of.
That gets you more views, and that gets you money, and that's how the
you're right about
works.
too. So that brings us back to this feature, which was so hard to write about, and which resulted in our first, I want to say, our longest feature probably in the history of the magazine.
Yeah,
at 4,200 words, where we tried to present exactly what's going on, exactly what's at stake with this current prime minister and what she faces. And again, I'm very proud to have it in this magazine. I think we hope we've set a tone for where things are going and what's at stake. And I'm grateful to you for writing this, and I'm grateful to the Prime Minister for taking the time with, again, an English language magazine in Iceland.
Mm. Yeah, definitely. And I think when you're speaking of English language, I think maybe what I found interesting was also the question of immigration.
Yeah,
which is another topic that kind of populists tend to jump on and have been jumping on massively. And today, the government laid out the budget for the coming year and spoke about their priorities. And one of them was immigration. And I think it's kind of interesting that what I think Kristrún is doing is he's following in the footsteps of Mette Frederiksen, who is the Danish prime minister, which has taken a kind of increasingly hard-line stance on immigration. And, whether you agree with it or not, what I think the government is doing is that they're kind of outflanking
the far right
on this.
So you bring the center a little to the right instead of bringing in the far right.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's been, it seems to me that it's been happening also in, I think, Poland to an extent.
Yeah.
I guess you could call it the lesser evil.
Yeah, and we do, because there are certain things that, for instance, they're changing. So until now, if you had asylum status, you couldn't be kicked out of the country even if you were a violent criminal or found guilty. And they plan to change that. And I think by and large, with the public, that is a popular change to make.
Mm-hmm.
Especially there was a high-profile case
mm-hmm.
with a man that took up the name of our former president.
Yeah.
Well, it was a terrible, terrible thing. But and the change they're adapting, I think, is gonna take away a lot of the power from the populist right.
True.
To an extent,
True.
yeah.
And one of the other changes they mentioned is a cut in funding for
Icelandic
for foreigners.
Yeah, which shows a kind of question. Well, I mean, it's to an extent, as we have discussed, I mean, you can't really talk about immigration policies here unless you talk about tourism, which kind of fuels all of the immigration here.
And that's why I feel like a lot of people are not serious about this. It's because they don't care about that. The root cause of this, which is just we have been putting all our eggs into a low productivity sector,
mm-hmm.
which is the tourism industry that requires if you want to continue chasing growth, you need to be constantly chasing more and a bigger and bigger labor force. And where are you going to find that labor force? Well, you got to go abroad to find it. And that has been the driver of the immigration boom that has been happening. Not everyone that moves here comes to work in the tourism industry, but that's kind of the root cause of it. And then it's kind of, spreads out, and then you need more people working in construction.
Because you need more housing.
Yeah, and then you need more, you need to service the people that are coming here to work in the tourism industry. And, as a kind of an experiment, I went on the Centre Party's website yesterday to check out what they had said about the tourism industry.
You're not going to just look at pictures of horses?
No, but because this is a party that is now talking a lot about immigration being such a massive problem and it needs to be dealt with, and there are too many immigrants. And let's be clear here, when people talk about refugees in Iceland, it's a wink, I think, very clearly, because you're talking about immigrants in general. Because why are you then putting that into discussion about we need to protect our language and our culture?
We have so few refugees.
There are so few.
Makes no sense.
I think so far this year it's been something like 300 applications.
Dog whistle thing.
Yeah, I think it definitely is. But going onto the website, they didn't have a lot about the tourism industry, to be honest. But what was there was we need to support growth,
Yeah.
especially in the countryside. This is kind of their focus. So I'm curious, where do they expect the growth in the tourism industry to come from, if not with immigrant laborers? It's impossible.
It's impossible, yeah.
Like either you support zero growth or negative growth in the tourism industry, or you support immigration.
Yeah. And we should note the unemployment rate in Iceland is currently 2.6%, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's low. I mean,
Very low.
It's too low to
That's
almost function.
that's basically just people between jobs numbers.
Yeah, isn't it like 2.5 is considered like a healthy unemployment level or something?
It's normal.
Yeah, and so that is the key issue. If you are serious about slowing down immigration into Iceland, then you need to be serious about slowing down the economic factors that are driving it. You can't have it both ways. If you want a continuously growing tourism sector, and by and large, if you want a continuously growing economy,
right,
you need people, you need workers. Now, that's why I always wonder, like with the Center Party, like, are you really serious about this? Like, do we think, I mean, by and large, they are the most economically right-wing party in parliament.
Mm-hmm.
Are we seriously going to believe that they are going to take the golden goose of the Icelandic economy, the tourism industry, which does not take criticism lightly, and chain it up, slow it down, or decrease it? No, I don't think so. I think that's never going to happen.
It would be interesting to ask Sigurður about exactly that.
Yeah, sure, I'm sure he's been calling the grapevine. He wants to come by. So
yeah, I mean, it would be interesting, but I have no idea what he would say.
No, but it's hard to circle that square or whatever you call it. It just, those two things just don't go together.
No, they don't. Like,
you're kind of at a loss for what any of the political parties really have, as other than saddle kicking, have for
policy ideas,
for policy,
which actually makes sense or hold together. Yeah, I mean, it is kind of hard to tell at this point. I mean, I guess not only the filibuster we mentioned before, but the fact of the just sheer lack of ideas on how to run things and do things is probably a part of the reason why these opposition parties are not doing great in the polling. Yeah, they have nothing to add somehow. They have nothing to say, it seems.
No, not really. But it's also, a big part of them were in the former government.
Mm-hmm.
So how can they come and criticize policies that they put in place?
Yeah, maybe a little too early for that.
Like the big taxi discussion.
Yeah,
it's very difficult for the Independence Party to stand up and say, well, this is terrible.
Yeah, it's their policy.
It was their policy.
The recap, what was the...
Oh, it's, so what is the recap again? I think they eased the requirements you needed to hold the taxi license, right?
Yeah, so effectively you used to have effectively a monopoly on taxi driver licenses, which was terrible. You could never get a cab, It'd be like a Friday. It was like normal. You remember this?
It's still sometimes impossible. Actually.
But I just remember, like, you were going downtown, and I remember being at a party when I was younger, and you had to order a cab, and then it would show up 2 hours later.
The line was amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, it was bad, 20 years ago, and then it became an absolute fucking joke.
Yeah.
It was just impossible to get a cab. And which is astounding if you've lived, I don't know, like I did in Sweden, and you wanted to get it's so easy.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so the result of this is that there are more taxis around, but there have been some issues, right?
Well, there have been some high-profile cases.
Yeah,
of bad
behavior,
doing bad things.
But I mean,
overcharging, all sorts of shenanigans.
I believe VCERT had a feature on a taxi driver being abusive towards customers.
Mm-hmm.
This has been in the media a lot over the past 6 months or so.
And something it's been like stories running around that if you are Icelandic, they charge you one rate, and if you're not, they just charge you another one, which is not the way it is supposed to be. So that's the stories that have been going on. So it's been a discussion, and it's been very hard for the Independence Party, who would gladly have a field day on this because it's their policy.
Yeah, and that's why they can't really they can't maneuver much around this.
No, and it's probably going to get changed too by the current.
That was one of the things that was mentioned today.
Yeah. So no go for the opposition there.
Yeah,
they're shit.
So after with the new government, how do we follow it, especially English speakers? Are they able to? I mean, we have a pretty transparent government here. They're just going to get on TV and watch Alþingi in session and have any idea what's going on, do you think?
That's a bit of a language barrier, I would say.
Yeah.
I guess it's up to us, but
but we expect
we have to
a lot with the popularity going in. We expect a lot of small wins in the next 3 weeks, I would expect, based on what I read in your piece.
Yeah, doesn't it feel like they have kind of a lot of wind in their sails?
Well, yeah, I mean, the Social Democrats do.
Yeah.
The People's Party
is dwindling.
Is struggling.
Yeah.
And which is, and Reform is kind of just keeping their own, I guess, at the moment.
Yeah. I guess it's kind of normal for the People's Party to like, they're kind of a, what is the term for this? Óvinsælda atkvæði. They're like a
protest vote.
Yeah, they got a lot of the discontented voters who are still discontented no matter what you do, I guess.
Yeah, and they're also the junior partner of the government.
Yeah,
and the junior partner tends to be punished for whatever reason.
And they've never been in coalition before.
Yeah, and they're a bit. How do I put this? Unrefined, I guess.
Unrefined is a good way of putting it.
Yeah.
They've had a few gaffes between them.
Yeah. I mean, effectively, the only gaffes of the government so far
have been them. Yeah.
Yeah.
What's the most amusing one?
Well, amusing or most rememberable is that one of the ministers resigned because it came to light that she had.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, had a kid with kids.
Yeah.
Effectively.
Many decades ago.
Well, there was something about the chairman of that party having been calling people around town semi-threatening some consequences. I don't know.
There's just been these kind of
odd things. The Minister of Education's English is
poor,
and
is Icelandic as well.
Yeah, so stuff like that.
It's been a bit weird.
It's weird, but it fills up the news feeds. It's nice.
Yeah.
Gives you content. Few things. Yeah.
I'm excited to see where it goes.
Well, I mean, I would have to agree with the sentiment that Kristrún was sort of giving in that interview of yours, that it's important, I think, that they do well and that they manage to get some of their things done.
Yeah. And
not because I'm necessarily so pro any political party whatsoever, but I think it's genuinely true that it's important for the Icelandic government to do well for the next few years in terms of policies and success for democracy.
Yeah,
it's a good point.
And I think for a lot of people, it will also be just important that they do something, because that was the criticism that was leveled against the previous government heavily, which was inaction on so many issues.
They would. I guess the joke was that because they inherently couldn't agree on any policy, they just enacted no policies.
Yeah.
And you kind of see how that was somewhat true in the case of like the whole Grindavík thing, where like I guess they kind of agreed that it was fair to like buy up the housing in Grindavík, the town that was
became overrun by
lava, or surrounded by lava and so full of crevasses that you can't really walk around there safely, I guess. And in line with what happened when we had the Westman Islands eruption in 1973, I think it was. It was just the government just decided, okay, we're just buying up all the housing so the people can, buy houses elsewhere. But unlike 1973, where they actually built a lot of housing for purpose, because we're talking thousands of people, around 1,000 households in a fairly small market that had already become almost inaccessible and more demand than what's the reverse of that? Supply. Yeah, they didn't think about the supply side at all, probably because they couldn't sort of agree on how to deal with it. So you just ended up dumping another 1,000 households into an already overheated housing market, resulting in a hike in the prices and all of that stuff. So they basically, like, every time they could just do nothing, they would do nothing, even when it was a terrible idea.
Yeah, and I mean, that was the same with immigration.
Yeah.
Like, the explosion of immigrants, the number of immigrants happened
during their tenure,
and there was no policy in place for anything.
Well, because there was no policy in tourism, and if you want to have infinite growth in tourism, you should maybe think about the infrastructure, but they didn't really do that either. That doesn't only go for the housing market here, it goes for the roads, it goes for the schools, it goes for everything. And no policy, no idea, just laissez-faire, whatever, see what happens.
Yeah, and I think it was the same with the energy production. I think you can already see that the new government is going to be more proactive in building more plants. Whether you support that or not.
Yeah, but that has also been sort of not happening because nobody could agree on anything.
Yeah.
So there's point being, there's been a lot of nothing happening for a rather long time, and stuff has been building up.
Yeah, and so far, I think the government has shown that they are. I think Kristrún is doing a good job at leading the government. You don't get a sense that there's a lot of friction so far, that they seem to agree on how they're going to do things. Whether that's going to last, it's
anybody's guess, really.
Yeah,
it is. I mean, it's a rare and unusual talent to be able to hold the coalition well together, it seems.
Yes.
And whether or not they have that ability remains to be seen yet.
And as we've seen, every government in Iceland has become increasingly unpopular.
Yeah, and even though they've had like this very unusual popularity in the first 6 months or whatever, 8 months.
Yeah.
Whether or not that lasts for a full 4 years will be determined by basically their success in getting policy enacted.
Yeah. Just one thing that I think you might be interested in regards to Iceland is probably the situation with the United States.
Yeah, I guess with an American editor, which is an unusual situation that somehow we have an American editor for an Icelandic magazine.
Who is that?
Somehow maybe we're not paying enough attention to American coverage. I apologize. Yeah, please go on.
No, what I think would be, what your readers need to understand is just how dependent on the U.S. Iceland has always been, or since World War II, that is. And our security infrastructure and foreign policy is very much based on what the Americans want and what they're doing. And what is interesting that since Trump took office, and especially since he started threatening Greenland, it seems that support for joining the EU began to rise. And I was speaking to a political scientist here in Iceland, and he believes that the 1951 bilateral defense agreement we have with the U.S. is not worth the paper it's written on, and that we need to join the EU as an alternative in our security policy.
Which is a point that I have difficulty grasping, because at this point the EU doesn't do defense. It's thought about it, it's talked about it, but it's still not doing it.
Yeah, but there are treaties within the member countries of protecting the outer border of the EU.
Okay, so we might want to check it in on that.
Yeah.
No, but there was like the former Prime Minister of Iceland, Trausti, Prime Minister in the 80s, Minister of Fisheries in the 90s, etc. He kind of made a decent point, I thought, a few months ago when the Greenland thing was being discussed, I guess January, February, where he was talking about how this kind of looked like the Cold War all over again, where, during the Cold War we had been polite and friendly towards the East, towards the USSR, but looked west or to the United States for our defense and to somebody to trust. And he was kind of saying that this is maybe shifted polarly. So, we have to be friendly and nice to the United States, of course, but we kind of have to look east towards Europe for our security, which is mildly unsettling change, but, perhaps not completely inaccurate.
Yeah, and I think clearly, like with the rest of the world, this is going to be a big feature of this government, is how do you navigate the relationship with the United States? And who knows what's going to happen? I think my prediction would be, let's say Trump does what he's been threatening to do and just invades Greenland, for instance. You should remind your listeners that Greenland is only like 360 kilometers away from Iceland. Then that might seriously change the calculus when it comes to joining the European Union.
Yeah, I don't want to go there.
That seems like a good closing.
Yeah. I'm going to end with an untrue fact. You can supposedly see Greenland from Bolafjall in the Westfjords, but that's not true. But people say it all the time.
Let's just say it's true.
Well, Elías, thanks for coming by and discussing this. It's a lot of stuff to. Well, we've talked about a lot of things that are kind of hard to digest, I guess, and I'm sorry about that. You can just re-listen if it was hard. I hope we were clear enough on some of our points, and I hope it wasn't too sort of Icelandic. What is the term for this? In-house baseball.
Right. Well, I mean, if we weren't entertaining, then that was our political goal.
Yeah. Like
boring and competent.
Boring and competent is the latest cool thing. We should take clowns and buffoonery out of politics again.
Make institutions fun again.
Make institutions great again. I don't know about fun. Make them boring and great.
Yeah, I guess that's better.
Well, that was it for now. Thanks for dropping in.
Thank you for having me.
See you later. Bye-bye.
Bye.